Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. The term compassionate conservatism was one of President Bush's slogans, but this is my own version, and so I have to take all the blame and maybe all the credit for it. The core belief in my version of compassionate conservatism is that once one provides a very basic safety net for everyone, additional resources should be allocated according to merit. That is, the most resources should go to those with the greatest potential to improve all of our lives. Liberals' core domestic belief is the opposite, that we should redistribute more from society's haves to, and choose your jargon, the least fortunate, the most disadvantaged, the most underprivileged, the most vulnerable. First, note that all of those terms completely externalize responsibility for a person's lack of success. In other contexts, psychologists urge an internal locus of control if a person expects to better their situation. But with regard to the achievement gap, liberals worry about offending certain population groups, so they cover their own butts even if it means hurting the people they claim to want to help. More important, every dollar spent redistributing from the haves to the have-nots comes at a huge net cost. Liberals like to talk about the ultra-wealthy, but notwithstanding the tiny percentage who pay little tax despite their massive income, the not cherry-picked overall average is that the top 1% already pay 50% of the federal income tax. And even if liberals wrested 100% from that top 1%, even that wouldn't be enough to give the poor for free what everybody else has to pay for. Healthcare, college, housing, food, transportation vouchers. That means the reward to the have-nots and the punishment of the haves redounds to the middle class, who pay the most painful share of taxes, and most of whom have delayed gratification to get more education and training, who show up to work every day, and endure ever more vitiating commutes. Indeed, liberals are hollowing out the middle class by ever-increasing taxes to pay for all that atop Obamacare, Medicaid, increased worker compensation limits, increased Social Security limits, sales tax, property tax, user fees, bridge tolls, ever-increasing parking and moving violations fines, etc., etc., etc. Can this benefit anyone? Let's start with the middle class. Today's ever-shrinking and strapped middle class now has no choice but to send their kids to public schools, often schools that take their tax dollars primarily to focus on the lowest achievers, which leaves average and above average kids bored, not living up to their potential. Indeed, average and bright kids are often used to tutor weak students. If your child can read on a 4th grade level, he or she may be forced into indentured servitude teaching, quote, the least among us to read The Cat in the Hat, or otherwise be stultified and deprived of their right to an appropriate level education. In part, that's because all the public school incentives are to help the, quote, disadvantaged. More broadly, today's middle class now must have 2 parents working to survive at above misery level. That means to not live in a too dangerous neighborhood, to not drive a too dangerously unreliable car, and so on. And the recipients of the middle class taxpayers' largesse benefit only in the short run. Imagine you were a low achiever, and so the sort of job you're likely to be able to keep may not be much fun in a factory, hotel, retail, and so on. Now, you hear liberals offer you the aforementioned panoply of services for sitting on your butt. Mightn't you acquire the welfare mentality, becoming ever more inert? Even more comforting to the poor, liberals blame the lack of, quote, income equality mainly on things external to the person, sexism and racism. Most, quote, underprivileged people aren't sophisticated enough to understand the lack of valid data to support that causal link for poor people's failure. Even if they could analyze the data, it's easier to brush that aside and accept that if not for racism and sexism, they'd be peachy keen. The compassionate conservative ensures opportunity, equal opportunity, based on merit. Yes, everyone, as a virtue of being human, is entitled to a very basic level of standard of living. Truly basic health care, truly basic housing, and so on. And that's defined by dormitory living. If it's good enough for Harvard students, it's good enough for welfare recipients. But it is not a basic right to have a private apartment, higher quality health care, and so on, paid for by the taxpayer. To give more than a very basic safety net both punishes middle-class people and provides too much temptation for sloth. The largely hard-working and contributory people in the middle, and yes, upper class, largely acquired their income not by inheritance, but by working long and hard, delaying gratification, and providing enough value that an employer or customer finds them worth paying. To wrest from such people, the people who make America function, yet more money than to cover poor people's true basics is a cosmic injustice. Compassionate conservatives care not just about the lowest achievers, but at least as much, no more, about the highest achievers, the greatest contributors to society, from plumbers to psychologists, train repairers to teachers, social workers to medical scientists. That is true compassion, focusing on what will most benefit all the people. We will not cure cancer or depression or even reduce the achievement gap by focusing our dollars and our efforts on the most, quote, vulnerable, unfortunate, underprivileged, or disadvantaged. Liberals' typical response to such an argument is to call it cold-hearted, insensitive, downplaying of externalities, if not downright racist and sexist. But name-calling is today an effective, yes, but dishonest, intellectually dark ages weapon. The fair-minded person should respond with solid rhetoric and data, not with ad hominem comments or with distorted or cherry-picked data or reporting, with fake news. Thanks for watching. I'm Marty Nemko.